Well, I'll continue to interrupt you. My name's Don Scavia. I'm Director of the Graham Sustainability Institute at the University of Michigan. And what we wanted to do during this session is a couple of things. First, we wanted to announce a new partnership between MSU and U of M in this climate space. But more importantly, to start soliciting some of your ideas and requests for information and that sort of thing. So I'm going to just give a couple of minutes up front about what this new partnership is, and then turn it over to Tom to lead us through a discussion of the sorts of needs that are in this space of climate. The center that's been created is one of NOAA's Regional Integrated Sciences and Assessment Centers. They're called RISAs. This program's been in place for a little over a decade, I think. There are now 11 of these centers. And finally, after all these years, we have one in the Great Lakes region, which is sort of interesting. Every time they would put up a map of the RISAs, there was this big empty space in the north central part of the country called our region here. Now, we finally have one here. Originally, our geographic scope that we had proposed, we talked about it being the watersheds of Lake Huron and Erie, basically Michigan, Ohio, and Ontario. But there may be some opportunities, some additional NOAA funding in the context of the new next spin-up of the national assessment that will be able to expand our region to cover more of the Great Lakes, and so we're interested in doing that. And what these RISAs are, and particularly the way we proposed it, is on one hand we're going to try to gather all of the climate information that's being made available from lots of different sources over time, particularly focused at downscale to our region, start making that information available, but in parallel to that, having very strong and long-lasting partnerships in relationship with stakeholders, trying to understand what it is that you think you need, what stakeholders think they need to actually make adaptation decisions. What kind of information do they need to actually make those kinds of decisions in their practices? So it's very important that we're downscaling to the scale of actual decision makers. This center, we're told we'll start getting our funding in September. So we actually haven't even started yet. We thought we'd hijack the end of this meeting as a way to start getting input on what people think they need. So with that short introduction, I want to turn it over to Tom, who will give us a little bit more and start the conversation.
I guess what I would say just briefly is that the two things that we are strongly committed to, sort of in the proposal and in terms of how we conceptualize this, is working with downscaling of climate projections, sort of making as much information available as we can, because of course in terms of thinking about vulnerabilities to climate change, opportunities and adaptation, you have to know what climate change looks like at an operational scale for whatever kinds of decisions you have to make. So that's sort of a given, and that will be a major part of the operation. And again, I think to show the spirit in exactly parallel strength to that, if you will, or commitment to that, is finding good mechanisms for being engaged with stakeholders and helping, working with them to help identify research needs, and then some of the funding we'll have, and then that isn't a lot, but will be targeted at seeing if we can answer specific questions that emerge from discussion with stakeholders, in addition to trying to provide the best information we can about what the climate in the region is likely to do, obviously always with a lot of uncertainty. And so what we're trying to do here, rather than go on about sort of what the proposal says, is to actually begin to elicit from you all thoughts about what kinds of information based on research and provided in what ways in terms of products, that could be websites, it could be tools, it could be reports, could we provide that would actually help you all in dealing with climate change, by making good decisions about adaptation to climate change. And I think we're just literally looking for you to say, well, this is something that I'm really worried about or that I have to deal with, and here's some things that would really help if we knew more about X.
You can stand up and shout. There's a microphone up here as well.
Yeah, we're getting... Yeah, that would be great, because we are recording the session. And it'd be nice if you told us who you were, because we know a lot of you, but not everybody. Yeah, I think that's probably right.
Hi, my name's Chuck Otto. I am not a scientist, but I do write about the environment. I would love to see a robust website that provides information, regularly updated information, as straightforward as possible, but also understandable to the average person, to help continue this conversation and kind of engage more people in the conversation about the environment and climate change.
Can I ask you, is there a particular scale of information that is most useful? Global temperature, tomorrow's precipitation in your backyard, within that range.
Wow. Trends. Obviously there'll be a great focus on the region. Really, it can run the gamut. Again, I'm not a scientist, so a super deep dive is something that I probably am not going to be able to understand and then interpret for other folks. But if whatever the two schools are doing in terms of research and what's happening with the region as well as nationally and internationally, I wish I could be more helpful, but again, not the expert, just someone who's trying to communicate to other people on a fundamental level what's going on and why we need to be thinking about it and all engaged in this conversation.
That's just the kind of input we're looking for.
I'm Douglas Jester. For context, I'm former mayor of East Lansing, former Great Lakes fishery manager, and currently an energy policy advisor to the state of Michigan. As I look at adaptation to climate change, I think part of what we need to be thinking about is the timing of the consequences of decisions, and therefore when do we need to take account of things. And it seems to me that in the ordinary course of business in Michigan, that the things that we're deciding now that have the longest period of consequence and are likely to be significantly affected by climate change mostly have to do with water engineering. So, how big do you build the bridge or culvert? What do you designate as the floodplain so that you don't build in it? Things of that sort. And I think that, if we could start to get to take account of what we expect in, say, 40 or 50 years as a consequence of climate change in those decisions as we're making them today would kind of be a very important place to start.
Hi. My colleague and I are interested in educating farmers about ways to mitigate climate change. And so, on the one hand, a question came up yesterday. It's one thing to inform them about ways that they can mitigate. It's another thing for them to be able to pay for those ways. So I guess I'd like to see some kind of listing of grants or other ways to fund these specific things. And then also on another note, local governments came up yesterday. So I'd like to see resources for local government officials as well, things that they can do to implement energy conservation or some kind of central warehouse for local government officials to turn to.
Yeah, I'll just add one comment to that regarding the farmers and adapting to climate change as well. How are they going to need to adapt, or how can they adapt, and if they think they need to and want to, who can they turn to for advice on that? So some kind of resource for that. And then as Claire mentioned, ways to pay for that, or ways maybe that they could get paid for providing those services. And then also maybe could you clarify, it's my understanding this RISA is focused on adaptation and not mitigation, but they're not always mutually exclusive. That was another conversation we had yesterday. Could you just clarify that a little bit with RISA?
So the primary focus is on adaptation, but recognizing that there are a whole range of adaptation activities that are also mitigation. So we're not going to exclude mitigation for sure, but look, sort of focusing on the adaptation side of it.
I think conversations I'm aware of that are going on in Washington are quite aware that the two blend, even though they've been seen as sort of separate things in different agencies in the past. People are quite aware that these things blend together, and so I think you're going to see agencies more able to blur that boundary as it makes logical sense in the future.
And I think one of the reasons why it may appear to be this big shift towards adaptation is that until now it's almost been exclusively mitigation. And so in the recent switch now to include adaptation makes it feel the way it is.
Vicki Anderson with USDA Natural Resources Conservation Service. This is very specific compared to the items that we've heard so far. We have conservation practice standards that for a lot of them are for establishing vegetation, and we have traditionally used the Mesic frigid line in Michigan, about US 20, to have a change in seeding dates for grasses and forbs. And my question would be, do we need to change that line? And if so, where is that change to, and what kind of change in dates would we be looking at?
Hi, my name is Lisa Quiggle. I'm from the Department of Community Health. And one of our concerns is with urban heat islands. We'd like more information on what the temperatures are supposed to be for these heat islands so that we could come up with a public health response, because it is one of our big issues, people dying in heat waves. The other thing we'd like to see, too, is possibly some sort of adaptation, you're using NOAA. How would you plan a city better? Should we put in more green space? Should we have more tree planting to reduce, the reflection and the heat island effects and that type of thing, so that we can actually reduce the heat island effects for people?
My name's Chris Hoving. I'm with the Michigan Department of Natural Resources and Environment. I remembered the environment that time. And I have lots of questions and interests. I've been working on an appendix to our Wildlife Action Plan, and that should come out this summer, so it should be available by the time you're starting this fall. And that will outline the different research needs that we have within the wildlife community here in Michigan. The other states, Ohio, I'm not sure if there will be other states, but Ohio probably is also doing something similar, and so they would have an addendum probably to their wildlife action plan that would be similar. But some of the things that I'm interested in would be predicted future snowfall, because that has a big effect on our wildlife. The changes in coastal wetlands, where they would move to if they'd move out into the lake, how the lake levels might change, and then groundwater would be another one that's critical to some of our most endangered taxes, such as mussels, some of our fish, and so on.
Hi, I'm Kim Hall from the Nature Conservancy, and I would echo Chris's list and add a couple more. I think the hardest thing for us to get a handle on is extreme events, especially effects on hydrologic systems from extreme events, so extreme rainfall. The other piece that we have a really hard time with is, once we have a feeling for what we want to do in terms of adaptation, is actually putting some economic values on the ecosystem services that we're either increasing or promoting through that, so that we can then get more support to actually get what we want to do funded. So if you have that kind of economic expertise in your team, that would be really helpful to us.
Hi, I'm Chuck Pistis from Michigan Sea Grant. In the previous breakout that focused on community adaptation, we had a lot of discussion on how to get the concept of adaptation through to communities. And one interesting idea that capitalizes on the initial discussion on a website is to try to assemble successful case studies that communities have have put in place to adapt to climate change, and that way other communities could look at success stories and perhaps incorporate the best aspects.
Hi, I'm Jan Eberhardt. I'm with the Division of Science and Math Ed at Michigan State University. The whole educational component here would be really critical to make available, whether they are grain-sized lesson or units on, and it's not just science education, but on educational projects or ideas that teachers could adapt and adopt, so that their students could understand what adaptation might mean in this context.
Doug Glancy with the Carbon Trust, and being a graduate of SNRE and the business school at Michigan, one of the things, and it doesn't fit exactly into this arena, but it does seem like the infrastructure that a lot of people were talking about of information sharing fits into it. You know, even at the University of Michigan, there's a lot going on at the different schools, at engineering, at Ford, at the law school, at the business school, and frankly, very seldom do people talk to each other. It's everybody's in their own silo, and it's definitely true across, the two universities. Obviously, in the fall, we probably don't want to talk to the University of Michigan State, but I think the infrastructure that a lot of people are talking about, information sharing, especially at the graduate level, this is a systems issue. And there needs to be a lot more sharing amongst the different schools within each university and frankly across universities. So the infrastructure, if that website and what have you is built, I think thinking about something like that as that's being built would be very beneficial.
I should have mentioned that Ohio State is actually a co-PI on this.
Shows how far we'll go.
That's right. That's right.
And Guelph, actually.
That's right.
Boom, boom.
I failed to mention, Chuck Pistis and Julie Winkler are both co-PIs on this project. You probably know them. I wanted to point them out. They're both here.
Hi, I'm Mike Sobochinsky, planning analyst, hazard mitigation planner with the Michigan State Police. I would say that one possibility for institutionalizing or having a lot of momentum built on climate change could be to have the issue included in comprehensive plans. These are done at the local level, statewide, any zone communities. If the information that you produce is packaged in a way that makes it amenable to use by community planners, local, county, regional level packaging of information, and if there's outreach to that group, it could be something where they may not have researched these issues, regional hydrology and things themselves, but can incorporate the information for their community from your website. And there's something I was thinking of. The U.S. Geological Survey has a hydrological website that I found very useful. It's Water Watch. It's based on their stream gauges around the state, and they have real-time information about the levels, that the water levels at these gauges. Flood warnings come out of these, projections about the number of houses and such that would be impacted by flooding. Something like that, if there are projections being done for climate change, and they could be packaged in a way, perhaps in partnership with USGS, and done in a way that matches some of the planning jurisdictions, then I think that could be really helpful and also potentially far-reaching in its impact.
Yeah, hi, I'm David Webb from the Wisconsin DNR, and we're chasing down some adaptation information ourselves, and I'd like to build off of that comment by the previous gentleman. And we've heard a lot of people in Wisconsin urge us to, on the question of scale, to consider presenting and quantifying information on, especially for comp plans, for water stuff at the community level and whatnot, to package information on a basin or watershed scale, so that it's relevant for city engineers, planners, people that are writing comp plans, consultants, I think, and at least in our state, that wind up writing a lot of comp plans. So on the question of scale, and a lot of it, at least in what we've been working on, comes down to aquatic issues, whether it's surface water, groundwater. People want basin or watershed-specific type information, because we started producing maps that weren't specific to basin or watershed and just curves fitting various metrics. And people said, that's great, but tell us what it is for this basin or that watershed. So just minor point. Thanks.
Mike Bolak, Michigan Department of Natural Resources and Environment. We have a very strong interest in obviously implementing our climate action plan. There's 54 policy recommendations in there. There is definitely a need to ground truth some of the recommendations as far as the basic research needed for us to move forward on that. And I could see you all helping in that role. So sometime, hopefully in the near future, we could sit down and take a look at where is that commonality and what your role could be in facilitating the state to do that. Also, I can just see, obviously, by what you're going to be doing, having a central coordinating role just on climate change, whether it be adaptation or various aspects of mitigation, and then us continue to work with you beyond just the policy recommendations. So.
But a comment from a student. Is there a student? You raised your hand.
Yeah, I'm not a student at the moment. My name is Jim Carter. I'm an attorney in renewable energy in Grand Rapids. And yesterday, late in the afternoon, I think it was David Webb's presentation, I hope I don't have that wrong, on what Wisconsin is doing. You had some wonderful slides near the end that unfortunately you had to race through very quickly. But I think a very simple thing that could be done is use those slides and crank in the numbers for Michigan. They were great. Had things on changes in the growing season, what the temperature change was going to be in degrees by mid-century, the species that were going to be gone or endangered or be replaced by other species. So I think Dave's got some great slides there, and I'd like to see the same thing for Michigan.
So I was wondering a little bit about the content or the format. Web came up a bunch of times, a website. Are there other forms of information packages that work better than websites for certain applications, or is that pretty much all we need to focus on? Maya?
Oh, sorry, I was stalking somebody.
Hi, Wayne B.A. with the MSU Land Policy Institute. One type of information I think would be helpful is assessment tools, indicators, web-based perhaps. If you look at just how some other indicator tools have caught on, and how if one community, and we have a number of communities that are starting to use the same assessment tools, we can start having some of that, gauge some of that progress. So the analogy of how LEED has taken off, and if we can have some of those, there are a number of different indicators out there, and we can take from the climate change report and perhaps start to develop some of those indicators. I mean, we've had an assessment tool for smart growth, for instance, that we've used through the Land Policy Institute. We've adapted it for coastal communities as well. There could be some type of climate change tool that we start using across Michigan that communities embrace. So I would encourage that as one of the things to look at as well.
On the question related to format of data, I think it's been really helpful. Within the Nature Conservancy, we have a tool called Climate Wizard where you can actually download the projection data and put it right into your GIS. If you have, local downscaling data that we could do the same thing and incorporate it into our own tools, that would be really helpful.
Hi, Sean Gowdy. I was thinking that maybe there could be a public service announcement that could be broadcast on. My concern would be like something more culturally sensitive. like for the Detroit area, so that they know what they can do that may be different from what Lansing does, would be kind of nice, just so they can get the communication out.
For all that walking around. My name is Monica Patel. I'm from the Ecology Center, and I think that what would be useful in terms of building off of the community planning efforts, giving communities resources to do those, to do what other successful communities or more successful communities have been doing. Building off of that, because this is an effort involving a lot of universities, having experts and literature that focuses on what those communities are going to need, like one a clearinghouse sort of data and actual people who know Michigan and know our needs would be really useful for a lot of the planning efforts that are going to have to happen. So I think something web-based or on, dare I say it, paper would be helpful. But paper might get outdated, so do web.
Hi, I'm Lori Cameron. I'm from the Michigan Department of Community Health, and we have a grant right now to plan for the health effects of climate change in the state of Michigan. We've been having a series of meetings with local health departments. There's 34 in the state, if you don't know. And what we're hearing from the health officers is that they really need information available on their level in order to plan for events that could affect human health. Now, I don't know if it's possible for you to generate data on that fine a scale, such as a county or a district level, but anything that approaches that would be easily accessible to them, sort of prepackaged, so that they can go to their constituency and point at changes that may be occurring and advocate for planning to deal with the effects, let's say, of an increasing heat or increasing precipitation, rain events followed with drought that would increase the number of mosquitoes that would cause, things like West Nile, things like that. They're very hungry for. They need to be able to document to their bosses that this is for real and that they need to plan for that.
I wanted a student, so I got elected. We were just talking that it would be interesting to have a resource where graduate students and other researchers could go and look at types of research topics where you're lacking data, to give people ideas of sort of some things where they could make a contribution. And I think it's especially important for people coming to this area for graduate school that are not really familiar with the area but still want to be able to contribute somehow.
Julie Dahl with Michigan State University. Kind of building off of that, I think I agree with everything that's been said and what's been needed, and I think it would be neat but also to have something a little more interactive. So back to from the farmer's perspective, perhaps maybe have a case study online, but then maybe have a day where farmers or others in ag in ag can go and see a farm where adaptation practices are being utilized and talk to the farmer. And maybe then we bring in the grad students in the different departments and link them up with that too, so they can hear what are the problems on the ground from farmers or others, land managers, etc.
Madison Hall, a doctoral student, and I don't know if anyone said this, but I thought it would be interesting to have a revolving committee of doctoral graduate students in different climate change areas that would go to local schools from elementary through high school and give a little talk on their areas of research, and that way introduce the students to different things that are being looked at, and also maybe little boosters from MSU, and then raise awareness too.
She meant and you of it.
Hi, this is Lori Cameron again. I'm hearing from the federal health agencies that they were really looking for quantification. Again, this is an area of documenting what's going on and being able to measure an association between a change in one of the climate indicators and a health effect. I know that the National Institute for Environmental Health Sciences just last week on Earth Day announced a major research initiative around climate change and human health. There's a need for tools of all sorts, but in public health in particular, we find we need to be able to maybe not count the bodies, but document the relationships in order to get resources to be able to adapt and protect people's health from the effects of climate change.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. This is very rich and exactly the kind of input that we're looking for. I mean, it's, I was going to say it's unusual, but actually I don't think that across my career it's not at all unusual that most of us who work on environment broadly defined and certainly on climate change have kind of our core scientific interests that drive us. But most of us also really want to make sure that our research is useful. Some of you may know the metaphor of Pasteur's quadrant, where you do work that both contributes to fundamental knowledge but that is also useful for society. And I think our feeling in this project is the only way we can be sure that we're likely to be useful is to be in conversation on an ongoing basis with you all to make sure we're, as to the extent we can, providing information that actually helps you out in doing the difficult jobs you've got to do. So this was great, and this is just the start of what will be a continuous process for this center. So thank you. Yeah, we're going to have our desserts. And again, the climate session will kick up again, the public opinion at, what did we say, 1:30?
Yes.